They say that sometimes the greatest secrets remain hidden behind the brightest lights. And in Hollywood, there's no legend whose silent departure sent a louder shockwave than Gene Hackman. After winning some of the most coveted awards in the industry, he chose to vanish from the spotlight, an abrupt exit that puzzled his fans and colleagues alike. But was it simply a case of an aging star retreating, or did he walk away carrying the weight of Hollywood's darkest truths? Rumors suggest he had reasons far more disturbing than anyone dared to imagine. Yet before he passed, Hackman hinted at something that shook the foundation of Tinseltown. Was it the unstoppable power wielded by secret industry figures? Or an unspoken vow to protect those victimized by an underworld most will never see? One thing's for sure. The story we're about to explore may forever change the way you look at Hollywood. Gene Hackman's path to fame was anything but typical. He wasn't part of any Hollywood dynasty or groomed for stardom from birth. In fact, he joined the Marines at a young age and held several odd jobs before finally catching a break in television and theater. His gritty authenticity, combined with that unforgettable face, made him a favorite of film buffs everywhere. Audiences applauded his intense performances in classics like Bonnie and Clyde and The French Connection. Then came more hits: The Conversation, Superman, Unforgiven, each new role propelling him further into cinema's highest ranks. By the late 1980s, Hackman had collected accolades most aspiring actors can only dream of. He had the spotlight on him. He was invited to every prestigious award ceremony. He was photographed with the biggest names in the business. Yet, amidst these glittering gatherings, there was already a crack in his facade. The more success he achieved, the more he discovered that behind the scenes of these glamorous events stood an empire built on questionable relationships and hidden agendas. People who worked with him from the early days noticed he was never comfortable at the loud after-parties. He preferred quiet corners, slipping away as soon as possible instead of smiling for camera flashes. What began as mild annoyance at red carpet phoniness soon transformed into deep disgust as he witnessed the games played by Hollywood power brokers. And as his fame grew, so did his awareness that something far darker lurked beneath the glamorous surface. Hackman's disillusionment wasn't immediate, it snuck up on him. The subtle manipulations, those suggestions to mingle with certain influential producers, the murmurs about paying your dues if you wanted to land award-worthy roles, these clues eventually made it impossible for him to ignore an uncomfortable truth. Hollywood's seeming generosity toward an actor of his caliber often came with strings attached. Before long, Hackman found himself wrestling with the question: is this place truly about celebrating art, or is there a hidden machine that chews people up and spits them out for profit? By the time The French Connection made him a household name, Hackman was already receiving calls that felt wrong to him. They didn't revolve around scripts or directorial visions. Instead, they hinted at private dinners, exclusive gatherings, and opportunities that would secure his standing among the Hollywood elite. At first, he tried to brush them off as harmless networking attempts, but it wasn't long before he noticed a darker tone, veiled propositions that couldn't be written into any contract. He began to see it everywhere: producers who looked at people like chess pieces, executives who manipulated entire careers by awarding certain roles or blocking others, and an unspoken rule that if you didn't play the game, you risked fading into obscurity. Whenever Hackman refused an invitation, he'd be reminded, sometimes subtly, sometimes bluntly, that turning down these friendly gatherings might cost him. Certain friends teased him about being too upright, suggesting he adapt if he wanted to keep collecting top roles. The real turning point came when Hackman overheard cryptic whispers on a set, words implying that awards might be arranged and that certain performers were already chosen to receive them long before the official envelopes were sealed. This notion that artistry could be overshadowed by backdoor exchanges rattled him to the core. More troubling still were the rumors that success could be guaranteed by cooperating with powerful tycoons in ways no one discussed openly. As the calls persisted, Hackman recognized that the dream factory he once admired might be built on the nightmares of the vulnerable. His response was unyielding. No, "I'm not interested." He turned down tempting proposals, refused to attend hush-hush gatherings, and distanced himself from the circles that promised rapid career boosts. For the short term, it didn't harm his public image. He was already famous enough to keep landing major roles. But behind the scenes, forces were taking note. The industry might have revered him for his talent, yet they disliked his unpredictability. In time, Hackman's refusal to conform would place him in direct conflict with an entrenched system that valued obedience and silence above all else. Rumors of scandal in Hollywood weren't new. From casting couch stories to manipulative producers, these allegations were as old as the industry itself. But Hackman stumbled upon something that disturbed even the most jaded insiders: stories of exploitation involving young individuals who came to Tinseltown hoping to find stardom. Some older actors whispered of an underworld where aspiring talent were pressured to trade innocence for opportunity. Others spoke in hushed tones about industry gatherings where lines of morality blurred. Hackman's moral compass couldn't let these whispers go. Though he never claimed to have witnessed the worst acts firsthand, the consistent stories troubled him enough to do his own investigating. He recalled colleagues who suddenly vanished or were blacklisted after refusing to play certain games. He saw strange alliances form between starlets desperate for a big break and producers who had no qualms about blurring ethical lines. The worst part was the knowledge that if even a fraction of these rumors were true, the entertainment empire was built on more than just nepotism and favoritism. It was built on silent suffering, too. In private conversations with a few trusted friends, Hackman expressed horror at the idea of helpless, starry-eyed newcomers being abused by people who held all the power. The entire facade of star-studded galas and award shows felt increasingly like a performance to hide something rotten at the core. He began to believe that his success, and the success of many others, might only be the polished veneer placed on top of a festering corruption that thrived on fear, silence, and complicity. Yet he felt powerless. Despite his fame, he was just one individual up against a network of wealthy and well-connected elites who had shaped Hollywood's very foundation. Speaking publicly would mean risking far more than just his career. He could be threatened, discredited, or worse. Some would call him paranoid. Others would say he was exaggerating. But Hackman knew, from the cautionary tales of other actors, that the invisible hands pulling the strings had the resources to make anyone's life unbearable. One of the most persistent legends surrounding Gene Hackman's later years is that he recorded conversations with executives, directors, and various behind-the-scenes power players. For decades, rumors have swirled that in an effort to protect himself, and perhaps one day expose the system, Hackman kept a personal archive. These were not public interviews or official negotiations, but hush-hush phone calls where shady deals and manipulations came to light. Supposedly, these tapes contained more than just mild gossip. They supposedly captured discussions about quietly prearranged award wins, deals struck outside official contracts, and even disturbingly explicit exchanges alluding to wrongdoing involving underage individuals. Hackman knew that without proof, any revelation he made would be dismissed as rumor or conspiracy. So he allegedly gathered this evidence over the years, storing it somewhere safe until he could determine the right moment. But when news broke of Hackman's passing, word spread that these tapes were nowhere to be found. People whispered that they'd vanished from his home, taken by forces unknown. Had they been seized by powerful individuals anxious to suppress damaging evidence? Or did Hackman entrust them to a loyal friend with instructions to release them if something happened to him? The uncertainty only fed the sense of dread that there was more to his story than the public knew. Close acquaintances claimed they'd seen a battered suitcase in Hackman's study that he never let anyone else touch. Yet after authorities were called in, they discovered the room empty of any such item. No tapes, no boxes, no evidence of wrongdoing. Everything had conveniently disappeared. In the end, the missing tapes became one of Hollywood's most tantalizing mysteries. If these recordings exist, they could be the most damning proof of the entertainment industry's darkest practices. If they don't, they remain a sinister legend woven into the myth of Gene Hackman's final hours. As his contact with Hollywood diminished, Hackman's life in Santa Fe became an odd mix of peaceful isolation and constant vigilance. The desert sunsets provided a stunning backdrop for a man seeking tranquility, yet those who visited him noticed an undercurrent of fear. Every so often, unfamiliar cars appeared late at night, idling at a distance where they seemed to watch without ever approaching. He received calls with no caller ID, only the sound of shallow breathing on the other end. Many chalked it up to paranoia, an aging star's overactive imagination. But the handful of trusted confidants who truly understood Hackman's past insisted he had every reason to be cautious. He was living proof that if you refuse to comply with Hollywood's unwritten rules, the system will find ways to push back. Someone who seemed so vital on screen felt more like a shadow in private life, always prepared for the possibility that someone or something might come knocking. His cousin, who occasionally helped him around the house, recounted glimpses of Hackman's 2 suitcases. One held personal items, clothes, a shaving kit, letters from loved ones. The other was off limits. When asked what was inside, Hackman never gave a direct response, simply muttering that it was his insurance policy. He lived as though at any moment he might have to flee, taking with him whatever secrets he refused to leave behind. Even long after his final on-screen performance, Hackman wasn't free from the orbit of Hollywood. The phone continued to ring, not with offers for new roles, but with reminders that the system had a long reach. Private messages came from old friends within the industry, warning him to stay safe. Whether it was genuine concern or coded intimidation, he couldn't say. But it was a sign that, despite his best efforts, the past was never truly behind him. About 3 weeks before the end, Hackman's reclusive life changed again. His cousin noticed him making repeated calls to people he rarely spoke to. He seemed desperate to connect with old acquaintances, individuals who might have once shared fragments of Hollywood's hidden secrets. Sadly, many of them were gone. Over the years, some had died in seemingly random accidents, car crashes in the dead of night, unexplained falls, sudden and shocking departures that raised eyebrows but never quite triggered investigations. Alone, Hackman was left to reflect on everything he'd learned since he was a budding star. He scrawled frantic notes that were found scattered around his office once he was gone. The scribbles were disjointed, single lines about the same faces and the same hands, as though the weight of those memories tormented him in his final hours. Even in that vulnerable state, he appeared determined to piece together the puzzle of who or what controlled Hollywood from behind the curtain. In one of his last phone calls, he allegedly told a friend, "I sold my soul when I was younger, and I can't leave this world without telling someone." The meaning behind that statement remains murky, but many interpret it as confirmation that he too had been forced to sign NDAs or keep silent about horrifying misconduct. Perhaps he felt guilty that, by not speaking up sooner, he allowed the same pattern to repeat for years. Or maybe he was alluding to that grim initiation from which so few escaped unscathed. When the news of his passing came, most outlets chalked it up to natural causes. No scandal, no mention of conspiracies or secret tapes, just a quiet obituary for a Hollywood legend who lived a long, successful life and retired peacefully. But those who knew better suspected a far more complicated story. They believed Hackman's silence had been demanded by certain powerful entities, and that any attempts he made to break that silence would cost him dearly. Now that Gene Hackman is gone, the questions he raised remain in a kind of eerie limbo. If the tapes truly existed, who has them? If they were destroyed, who wanted them gone? There's a lingering hope among his admirers that one day the truth will surface, forcing the industry to reckon with its hidden skeletons. But Hollywood is adept at burying controversy. Spin doctors, high-priced attorneys, and carefully timed media distractions have kept countless scandals contained before. Could Hackman's revelations, if fully brought to light, finally topple the empire that's run on fear and silence for decades? Or would the system adapt as it always has, offering up convenient scapegoats while the real puppet masters remain in the shadows? We may never know. But what's certain is that Gene Hackman's story isn't just about one man's decision to walk away from fame. It's a cautionary tale, reminding us that the public glitz often hides deeper, more unsettling truths. When you look at those red carpet photos of smiling actors, it's worth wondering how many of them carry burdens similar to Hackman's. How many endured manipulations and witnessed atrocities only to remain silent out of terror or the desire to preserve their livelihoods? Maybe he was one of the very few who attempted to break the cycle. Maybe those missing recordings hold the key to unraveling an entire network of corruption. Or perhaps they're gone forever, locked away by the very people he tried to escape. In the end, Gene Hackman's final chapter remains an enigma, one that challenges us to question the narrative fed to us by Hollywood. He might have left this world quietly, but the echo of his warnings lingers on. If we ever see conclusive proof emerge, it will likely shake the foundations of an industry that prides itself on selling dreams. Until then, the legend of Gene Hackman stands as both a testament to extraordinary talent and a chilling testament to how far those in power will go to keep certain secrets buried. The real question is, will we dare to keep asking what truly happened to him? And to everyone else who realized the cost of defying Hollywood's hidden lords,